The coffee mug slipped from my fingers when Miranda said those words. Not dramatically. Just a small fumble that sent lukewarm coffee splashing across our kitchen table, seeping into the stack of unpaid bills I'd been pretending to organize. A pause? I repeated, grabbing paper towels while my brain tried to process what my wife of 8 years had just announced over Tuesday morning breakfast. What exactly does that mean? Miranda didn't help with the spill. She sat there in her crisp business suit, perfectly applied makeup already in place at 7 a.m., scrolling through her phone like she just commented on the weather instead of dropping a relationship bomb. It means we need space, Nick. Time to figure things out. Her voice carried that practiced PR tone she used at work, calm, measured, designed to deflect questions. I've been thinking about this for months. Months. The word hit me like a slap. While I'd been fixing our leaky faucet and trying to plan a vacation we couldn't afford, she'd been mentally packing her bags. "And you're telling me this now because?" I asked, still mopping up coffee. "Because I'm leaving for Europe this afternoon. 2 weeks. Company retreat with the senior management team." I knew about the trip. What I didn't know was that it had transformed from business travel into some kind of marital sabbatical. Miranda worked as a PR manager for Carver Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company downtown, the kind of place where they threw around terms like synergy and paradigm shifts while making the same metal widgets they'd produced for 30 years. 2 weeks in Europe sounds more like a vacation than a pause, I said. She finally looked up from her phone, those green eyes I'd fallen for in college now cold as January rain. "Don't be dramatic, Nick. It's not permanent. I just need time to think about what I want." What she wanted. Not what we wanted. Not what our marriage needed. Just her. I'm Nick Grady, 38 years old, and I fix computer networks for small businesses around the city. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills, and I'm good at it. Really good. When someone's system gets compromised or their security needs an upgrade, they call me. I understand how networks function, how data flows, how to trace problems back to their source. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Sitting there watching my wife pack her emotional bags, I realized I'd never applied those same diagnostic skills to my own marriage. "So what am I supposed to do for 2 weeks?" I asked. "Whatever you want. Read those technical manuals you're always buying, catch up with Eli, figure out what makes you happy." What made me happy used to be coming home to her, used to be planning our future together, talking about maybe buying a house, maybe starting a family. But those conversations had dried up over the past year, replaced by polite small talk and the kind of careful distance roommates maintain. "Miranda, if there's something wrong, we can work on it. We can see a counselor or—" "I don't want to work on it right now." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I want to think. Alone." The finality in her voice told me this conversation was over. Miranda had always been decisive. It was one of the things I'd admired about her when we first met. She knew what she wanted and went after it. Apparently what she wanted now was time away from me. After she left for the airport, I sat in our quiet apartment staring at the coffee stain on the table. The silence felt different than usual, heavier, like the pause she'd mentioned had already begun, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day walking around our neighborhood. We lived in a decent area on the east side of the city, the kind of place where young professionals rented apartments while saving up for something better. Tree-lined streets, a coffee shop on every corner, the illusion of upward mobility. But walking those familiar sidewalks, I started noticing things I'd missed before. How many of our neighbors I didn't really know. How many for rent signs had appeared recently. How quiet everything felt in the middle of the day, like everyone else had somewhere important to be. When I got back to the apartment, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Miranda's things. Not in a crazy paranoid way. I'm not that guy. But she'd left in such a hurry, and something about her whole demeanor that morning felt off. Too rehearsed, too prepared. In her dresser drawer, underneath a stack of work blouses, I found a receipt from the Grandview Hotel downtown, dated 3 weeks ago. Room for 2, charged to her credit card. The Grandview wasn't where Carver Industries usually put up business travelers. It was expensive, boutique, the kind of place couples went for romantic weekends, the kind of place you definitely didn't need for a solo business meeting. I sat on our bed holding that receipt, and for the first time since Miranda's announcement, I felt something other than confusion. I felt angry. But anger wasn't going to get me answers. If 8 years of marriage had taught me anything, it was that Miranda didn't respond well to direct confrontation. She was too smart, too quick with explanations. If I wanted to understand what was really happening, I needed to be smarter about it. I fired up my laptop and did what I do best. I started gathering data. 3 days into Miranda's pause, I'd learned more about my wife's recent activities than I had in the previous 6 months of living with her. It started with the hotel receipt, but that was just the beginning. When you spend your days securing computer networks, you develop certain skills. You learn how information flows, how digital footprints work, how people leave traces of themselves everywhere they go online. Miranda had always been careful about her privacy, but she'd gotten sloppy lately. Overconfident, maybe, or distracted by whatever was occupying her attention. Her laptop was still in our bedroom. She'd taken only her work computer to Europe. I didn't crack her password. I didn't need to. She'd left herself logged into her personal email on our shared tablet, the one we used for grocery lists and streaming movies. I told myself I was just checking to make sure she'd arrived safely. That's how it started, anyway. The first thing I noticed was how many emails she'd deleted recently. Her inbox, usually cluttered with shopping newsletters and social media notifications, was suspiciously clean. But deleted emails aren't really deleted. They just moved to another folder. In her trash, I found 3 weeks of correspondence with someone named Greg Carver. Greg Carver, as in Carver Industries, as in her boss. The emails started professional enough, meeting schedules, project updates, the usual corporate back and forth. But they evolved quickly. By 2 weeks ago, Greg was suggesting private dinners to discuss your career development, and Miranda was responding with enthusiasm that seemed way beyond professional interest. "I've been thinking about our conversation all weekend," she'd written. "You're right that I need to be more aggressive about pursuing what I want." What she wanted, apparently, was Greg Carver. The most recent email sent the day before she left for Europe was short and direct. "Can't wait for Paris. 2 weeks of just us." Just us. Not just us and the senior management team. Just us. I sat back in my desk chair, staring at the screen. My wife hadn't gone to Europe for a company retreat. She'd gone for a romantic getaway with her married boss. The smart thing would have been to confront her immediately. Call her in Paris, demand explanations, start the ugly process of figuring out what came next. But I've never been impulsive. My job requires patience, methodical thinking, the ability to trace problems back to their root cause before attempting solutions. So instead, I kept investigating. Greg Carver was 44, married for 15 years to a woman named Janine, with 2 teenage kids. His social media presence was exactly what you'd expect from a corporate executive. Carefully curated photos of charity events, company milestones, family vacations that looked more like stock photography than real life. But social media only tells you what people want you to know. The real information was in the details they didn't think anyone would notice, like the fact that Greg's credit card had paid for Miranda's hotel room at the Grandview 3 weeks ago. I found that out by cross-referencing the receipt with some creative online searching, nothing illegal, just the kind of digital detective work that comes naturally when you understand how information systems connect. Like the fact that Miranda had been working late every Tuesday for the past 2 months, according to her calendar. But according to Carver Industries' website, their offices closed at 6 p.m. sharp, and the building required keycard access after hours. If Miranda was really working late, there would be records. Like the fact that Greg had recently updated his LinkedIn profile to emphasize his hands-on management style and commitment to mentoring rising talent. By the end of the week, I had a pretty clear picture of what had been happening. My wife was having an affair with her boss, and they'd used a company trip to Europe as cover for what was essentially a 2-week romantic vacation. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I could have called a lawyer, filed for divorce, tried to move on with my life. That's probably what most people would have done. But sitting alone in our apartment, surrounded by 8 years of shared memories and joint decisions, I realized I wasn't ready to just walk away. Miranda wanted a pause? Fine. But she was about to learn that pauses work both ways. And while she was off discovering herself in Paris cafes and romantic hotel rooms, I was going to discover a few things myself. Starting with a conversation I probably should have had months ago. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found in Greg Carver's company directory. "Hello, Janine. This is Nick Grady. I think we need to talk." Janine Carver lived in the kind of house that made our apartment look like a closet. Sprawling colonial in the suburbs, perfectly manicured lawn, 3-car garage with vehicles that cost more than I made in a year. The kind of place that screamed successful executive lifestyle. But when she answered the door, Janine looked anything but successful, and she was probably attractive under normal circumstances. Blonde, well-dressed, the kind of polished appearance that comes with money and time. Today, though, she looked like she'd been crying for a week. "You're Nick," she said, not a question. Thanks for agreeing to meet. She led me through a house that felt more like a showroom than a home. Everything perfectly coordinated, everything expensive, everything cold. We ended up in a kitchen that was bigger than my entire living room, sitting across from each other at an island that could have seated 8 people. How long have you known? She asked without preamble. About a week. You? 3 months. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Maybe longer. I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. 3 months. While I'd been obliviously planning date nights and worrying about our budget, Janine had been living with the knowledge that her husband was cheating. I couldn't imagine carrying that weight for so long. Why didn't you confront him? I asked. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what? Suspicions? Greg's very good at making people feel crazy for questioning him. It's a skill he's developed over 15 years of marriage. I understood that. Miranda had the same talent. The ability to make you doubt your own perceptions, to turn your concerns back on you as personal failings. What changed your mind about meeting with me? I asked. Janine got up and poured herself coffee from a machine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She didn't offer me any. Because last night, Greg called me from Paris. Drunk, guilty, he told me he was thinking about leaving me. The words hung in the air between us. Whatever I'd been expecting from this conversation, it wasn't that level of honesty. He said he'd found someone who really understood him, someone who shared his ambitions, someone who made him feel young again. She sat back down, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug like it was an anchor. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, and he's ready to throw it all away for your wife. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a punch. Not just that they were having an affair, but that they'd convinced themselves it was some kind of great romance. That our marriages, our lives, were just obstacles to their happiness. So what do we do? I asked. Janine studied me for a long moment. What do you want to do? It was a good question. A few days ago, I would have said I wanted my marriage back. I wanted to work things out, find a way forward, rebuild what we'd lost. But sitting in this kitchen, talking to another person whose life had been casually destroyed by the same selfish decisions, I realized what I really wanted was simpler. I wanted them to understand what they'd done. I wanted consequences. I wanted them to feel the same confusion and helplessness they'd inflicted on us. I want them to face reality, I said finally. Reality? Right now, they're living in a fantasy. They think they can have their affair and their marriages, their excitement and their security. They think they can keep us in the dark indefinitely while they figure out what they want. I leaned forward. What if we took away that luxury? Janine's expression shifted. For the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely interested. What did you have in mind? Greg's having a company event next Friday, right? The quarterly meeting? She nodded. Big presentation for potential investors. He's been preparing for weeks. Miranda mentioned it before she left, said it was important for her career. I smiled, and it probably wasn't a nice smile. What if we made sure it was memorable for everyone involved? We spent the next 2 hours planning. Janine knew Greg's schedule, his habits, his insecurities. I knew Miranda's patterns, her social media accounts, her professional network. Together, we had access to information that could make their private affair very public very quickly. But more than that, we had motivation. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but a shared understanding of what it felt like to be treated as disposable. To have someone you trusted make unilateral decisions about your life while pretending everything was normal. There's something else, Janine said as I was getting ready to leave. Greg's been talking about promoting Miranda when they get back. Department head. Significant raise. Rewarding her performance? Something like that. Her expression hardened. He's planning to announce it at the quarterly meeting. Make a big show of recognizing her contributions to the company. The pieces clicked together. Miranda's sudden need for space, her confidence about the future, her willingness to risk our marriage. It all made sense if she thought she was trading up. Not just to a new relationship, but to a new life. Better job, more money, higher status. She wasn't just leaving me, she was leaving me behind. Friday's going to be very interesting, I said. Janine walked me to the door. Nick, when this is over, when they understand what they've lost, what then? I thought about it. A week ago, I would have said I hoped Miranda and I could find our way back to each other. But that was before I understood how carefully she'd planned her exit, how little our marriage had meant to her when something better came along. Then we move on, I said. But first, we make sure they understand exactly what moving on looks like. As I drove away from that perfect house in the suburbs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. For too long, I'd been reacting to other people's decisions, trying to hold together something that was already broken. Now it was time to take control of the situation. Time to show Miranda and Greg that actions have consequences. Time to give them the reality check they'd been avoiding. Friday couldn't come soon enough. The thing about revenge is that it requires patience. You can't just lash out emotionally and hope for the best. You need to plan, prepare, anticipate variables. You need to think like your targets think, understand their weaknesses, know exactly where to apply pressure for maximum effect. Fortunately, I'm very good at systematic thinking. Miranda and Greg were due back from Paris on Thursday evening. The quarterly meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at the Grandview Hotel, the same place where they'd had their first romantic rendezvous 3 weeks earlier. Greg had booked the event there personally, according to Janine. Probably thought he was being sentimental. I spent the week gathering intelligence and preparing materials. Every morning, I called in sick to work, told my clients I had food poisoning, would be back Monday. It wasn't entirely a lie. The whole situation made me feel pretty nauseous, but it also energized me in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Miranda's announcement, I wasn't just reacting, I was acting. Step 1 was confirming what I already suspected. I'd found plenty of evidence of the affair, but I needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. That's where my professional skills came in handy. Miranda had been posting on Instagram throughout her trip, carefully curated photos of museums, cafes, tourist attractions. But social media platforms embed location data in images, and if you know how to access that metadata, you can get very specific information about when and where photos were taken. Miranda's photos weren't taken at tourist sites around Paris. They were taken within a 6-block radius of a boutique hotel in the Marais district, the same hotel where Greg Carver's credit card had been charged for a week-long stay. But the real breakthrough came when I cross-referenced the timestamps on Miranda's photos with Greg's social media activity. While she was posting pictures of solo exploration and finding herself, he was liking and commenting on her posts within minutes, from the same location. Step 2 was documentation. I created a comprehensive timeline of their relationship, complete with screenshots, credit card records, hotel receipts, and location data. Everything organized, everything verified, everything presented in a way that left no room for doubt or alternative explanations. Step 3 was distribution strategy. Greg's quarterly meeting would have about 50 attendees, company executives, potential investors, department heads, key employees. Miranda would be there as part of the PR team, probably expecting her big promotion announcement. What they'd get instead was a very different kind of presentation. Janine proved to be an invaluable partner in this process. She had access to Greg's calendar, his email, his business contacts. More importantly, she understood the corporate culture at Carver Industries, knew which people mattered and which ones didn't. The investors are the key, she explained during one of our planning sessions. Greg's been courting them for months, trying to secure funding for expansion. If they lose confidence in his judgment, in his stability, the whole deal falls apart. And losing the deal would mean no expansion, no new positions, no promotion for Miranda. Janine smiled coldly. Probably layoffs instead. We met every evening that week, refining our approach. Janine's house became our headquarters, her kitchen table covered with printouts and timelines and floor plans of the Grandview Hotel. "You know this will destroy your marriage too," I said during one of these sessions. "My marriage has been over for months," she replied. "I just didn't want to admit it. Greg made his choice when he decided Miranda was worth more than 15 years with me." There was pain in her voice, but also determination. We were both casualties of other people's selfishness, but we didn't have to be victims. Thursday evening, I positioned myself in the airport parking garage where I could see the arrivals area. Miranda and Greg's flight landed at 8:30 p.m. I watched them come through the doors together, laughing about something, completely comfortable with each other. They didn't kiss goodbye, too risky in public, but the intimacy between them was obvious. The way they stood close together, the way Miranda touched his arm when she talked, the way he looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the world. It was painful to watch, but also clarifying. Whatever Miranda and I had once meant to each other, it was over. She'd moved on months ago. Now it was my turn. Miranda took a taxi home. I followed at a distance, watching her let herself into our apartment like she was returning from any normal business trip. She probably planned to spend the evening unpacking, preparing for tomorrow's big day, maybe practicing her surprised expression for when Greg announced her promotion. Instead, she was about to get a very different kind of surprise. I parked across the street and called Janine. "They're back," I said. "Good. Everything's ready on my end. The presentation materials are loaded, the timeline is confirmed, and I've made sure all the right people will be there. Any second thoughts? There was a pause. Nick, 3 hours ago my husband texted me from the plane. Know what he said? What? That he'd decided what he wanted. That we needed to talk when he got home. That it was time to be honest about everything. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the hurt underneath. 15 years, and he's going to end it with a text message and a conversation. I'm sorry, Janine. Don't be sorry. Help me make sure tomorrow counts. After we hung up, I sat in my car looking up at the windows of our apartment. Miranda was moving around inside, probably unpacking, probably planning her new life. She had no idea that her carefully constructed plans were about to collapse. Tomorrow she'd learn that actions have consequences, that you can't just pause one life while you audition for another, that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Tomorrow, everything would change. I started the car and drove to my hotel room. No point in going home tonight. That apartment belonged to a different version of my life, one where I still believed in the possibility of working things out. That version was over. Time to see what came next. Friday afternoon, the Grandview Hotel buzzed with corporate energy. Executives in expensive suits, potential investors with calculating eyes, employees trying to look important while staying invisible. The quarterly meeting was Carver Industries' biggest event of the year, and everyone knew it. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, not expensive, but clean and professional. The kind of outfit that lets you blend in at corporate functions without attracting attention. I'd learned a lot about invisibility over the past week. Janine was already there, playing the role of supportive executive wife. She worked the room with practiced ease, making small talk with investors, complimenting other wives on their outfits, acting like everything was perfectly normal. When she saw me, she gave the slightest nod. Everything was ready. Miranda arrived with the rest of the PR team, looking confident and polished. She'd gotten her hair done, probably yesterday, after she got back from Paris. New dress, expensive shoes, the kind of outfit you wear when you're expecting good news. She scanned the room briefly, probably looking for Greg, but didn't notice me in the crowd. Why would she? As far as she knew, I was at home nursing hurt feelings and waiting for her to decide our future. Greg made his entrance 20 minutes later, working the room like the successful executive he was. Firm handshakes, confident smiles, the kind of presence that made people believe he had everything under control. He found Miranda within minutes, and I watched them exchange a look that said everything about their relationship. Not just attraction, but conspiracy. They thought they were so clever, managing their secret affair while maintaining their professional facades. The presentation was scheduled to start at 2 p.m. in the hotel's main conference room. Tiered seating, professional lighting, a massive screen for slides and graphics. Greg had spared no expense making sure everything looked impressive. I positioned myself in the back row, where I could see everything but remain unnoticed. Janine sat in the front section with the other executives' spouses, perfectly positioned for what was coming. Greg took the stage at exactly 2 o'clock, commanding attention with the kind of presence that had made him successful. He started with the usual corporate talking points: quarterly earnings, market position, future projections. But today isn't just about numbers, he said, clicking to a new slide. It's about people. It's about recognizing the talent that makes our success possible. Miranda straightened in her seat. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. Which is why I'm pleased to announce several key promotions, effective immediately. He clicked to the next slide, which should have shown organizational charts and new position announcements. Instead, it showed a hotel receipt from 3 weeks ago. Room for 2 at the Grandview Hotel, charged to Greg Carver's personal credit card. The room went quiet. Greg stared at the screen, his confident expression shifting to confusion. I'm sorry, he said, fumbling with his presentation remote. Technical difficulty. He clicked again. The next slide showed text messages between him and Miranda, discussing their private dinner meetings and career development sessions. Another click, screenshots of Miranda's Instagram posts from Paris, with location metadata clearly visible, cross-referenced with Greg's credit card charges at the same hotel. Another click, a timeline showing the development of their relationship, from professional correspondence to personal meetings to romantic getaway. Greg had stopped trying to fix the presentation. He stood frozen on stage while 50 of the most important people in his professional world absorbed the evidence of his affair with a subordinate employee. In the audience, Miranda looked like she was going to be sick. She'd figured out what was happening, but there was nowhere to run. The room was packed, all eyes on the screen, everyone putting the pieces together. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, standing up in the back row, I think Mr. Carver's presentation speaks for itself. All heads turned toward me. Greg finally found his voice. Who are you? Security. I'm Nick Grady, I said, walking down the aisle toward the stage. Miranda Grady's husband, though I suppose that's about to change. The room erupted in whispers. Corporate executives love gossip, especially when it involves their competitors' personal scandals. "This is a private company meeting," Greg said, trying to regain control. "You have no right to be here." Actually, I was invited. I gestured toward Janine, who stood up in the front row. "Mrs. Carver thought your investors should understand exactly what kind of judgment and leadership they'd be funding." Janine's voice carried clearly through the room. 15 years of marriage, Greg, 2 children, and you were going to end it with a text message so you could promote your mistress. The whispers turned into open conversations. Investors were already reaching for their phones, probably calling their offices to discuss whether Carver Industries was still a viable investment opportunity. Miranda finally found her courage and stood up. "This is harassment. You can't just..." "Can't just what?" I interrupted. "Present facts, show evidence, hold people accountable for their choices." I walked over to where she was sitting, close enough that only she could hear my next words. "You wanted a pause, Miranda. You wanted time to figure out what you really wanted. Well, congratulations. You figured it out, and now everyone else knows too." Her face went pale. "Nick, we can talk about this privately. We don't have to what? Embarrass you in front of your colleagues, ruin your big promotion, make your personal life public?" I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Funny how that works. Actions have consequences. Greg had finally gotten the presentation screen turned off, but the damage was done. Half the room was already heading for the exits. The investors looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The other employees were either staring in shock or whispering furiously to each other. "The meeting is over," Greg announced, but his voice lacked any authority. "We'll reschedule when we can address these technical issues." Technical issues. Even now, he was trying to minimize what had happened. As people filed out of the room, I heard fragments of conversation that told me everything I needed to know about the future of Greg's career and Miranda's promotion. Completely unprofessional. How can you trust someone who... The investors looked horrified. His wife seemed to know everything. That promotion announcement is definitely not happening. Within 15 minutes, the conference room was nearly empty. Just me, Miranda, Greg, Janine, and a few stragglers who were probably hoping for more drama. Greg walked over to where I was standing, his face red with anger and humiliation. "You have no idea what you've just done," he said. "Sure I do. I've shown 50 of your most important professional contacts that you make decisions based on personal gratification rather than sound judgment. I've demonstrated that you're willing to abuse your position of authority to pursue subordinate employees. I've revealed that you conduct company business while managing personal affairs." I paused. "How do you think that's going to affect your expansion funding?" His expression told me everything. The investors were gone. The deal was over. His carefully planned future had just collapsed in front of everyone who mattered. Miranda appeared beside him, tears in her eyes but anger in her voice. "You've ruined everything," she said. "My career, my reputation, my..." "Your what? Your affair? Your secret promotion? Your plan to trade up from one marriage to a better one?" I shook my head. "I didn't ruin anything, Miranda. I just made sure everyone could see what was already happening." "We never meant for this to hurt anyone," she said. "That was the moment I knew our marriage was truly over. Not because of the affair, not because of the lies, but because even now, even caught red-handed, she was more concerned with managing the situation than acknowledging the damage she'd caused." "You never meant to get caught," I corrected. "There's a difference." Janine joined our little group, her composure perfect, despite everything that had just happened. "Greg, I'll be staying at my sister's house for the next few weeks," she said calmly. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. I'm sure you understand that this situation makes reconciliation impossible." Greg looked like he wanted to argue, but what could he say? That his affair with a subordinate employee was somehow justifiable? That his wife should forgive him for planning to leave her for someone else? "Janine, we can work this out privately," he tried. "Like you worked out your relationship with Miranda privately?" She smiled coldly. I don't think so. Some things are too important for privacy." As we walked toward the exit, Miranda called after me. "Nick, wait. We need to talk about what happens next." I turned back to look at her one more time. She was still beautiful, still poised, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. But she was also a stranger, someone who'd been planning a completely different life while pretending our marriage still mattered. "What happens next is simple," I said. "You get what you wanted. Your pause is permanent. You're free to figure out what makes you happy." "But what about us? What about our apartment, our things, our..." "There is no us, Miranda. There hasn't been for months. You just forgot to mention it." I walked away then, leaving her standing in that conference room with the wreckage of her carefully planned future. Outside, Janine was waiting by the valet stand. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it. "Lighter," I said finally. "Like I've been carrying something heavy for a long time and I finally got to put it down." "Any regrets? About the marriage ending? Yes. About how it ended? No." I looked back toward the hotel entrance. They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. Janine nodded. "Greg's career is over. The investors will never trust him after this, and the board won't keep an executive who creates this kind of liability." And Miranda. "No promotion. Probably no job. Once the gossip spreads through the office, she'll be lucky if Greg gives her a decent reference." We stood there for a moment, two people whose lives had been casually destroyed by other people's selfishness. But we weren't victims anymore. We'd taken control, demanded accountability, ensured that actions had consequences. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Start over. Figure out who I am when I'm not trying to hold together a marriage that ended years ago." She smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it looked genuine. "What about you?" "Same thing. Start over." As I drove away from the Grandview Hotel, I realized that Miranda had been right about one thing. I did need to figure out what made me happy. The difference was, now I was free to actually do it. The pause was over. My real life was about to begin.